You know, as time goes on in the 4 years of this administration, it's more important than ever that you're with me. Several months ago, Westwood and I signed a contract to extend what I do here for 5 years, starting in February 1st, which is just a few days away. It overlaps with the 4 years, obviously, of this administration. And I think you're here, we're uniquely positioned, you and I, to explain these things, how they go on, and why what so much that's being done is the massive ruling class, power-hungry effort to hold on to what they have. Donald Trump has come in and he has said, look, we got to slash government, we got to control the bureaucracy, there's so many things we have to do. People voted for him. This is what they want. You know, we did the same thing with Reagan. We've done this from time to time, but they don't allow the people's will to take hold. It's that simple. We have a massive, ubiquitous federal government with departments, administrative agencies, divisions, units, offices that just get funded over and over and over again, and they just grow and they grow and they grow. Then we have a civil service, many of whom are members of a union, public sector union, which just grows and grows and grows, protects and protects and protects everyone and anyone who pays dues, which is overwhelmingly supportive of the Democrat Party in their, not just their donations for campaigns, but in their rulemaking and in their efforts to sabotage a president like Donald Trump. We have a Congress that has delegated enormous power to this fourth branch of government that doesn't even exist in the Constitution. They've delegated an enormous amount of power. The vast majority of laws that are made in this country are not made by your representatives. They're made by bureaucrats. Bureaucrats working with special interests. Bureaucrats working with NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Bureaucrats mostly working with leftists in one form or another. Behind your back, in the shadows, off the radar. That's not representative government. It's tyranny by another name. And they've delegated to this bureaucracy the power of lawmaking, of making fines, criminal penalties. They've delegated to this federal bureaucracy the ability to determine what kind of appliances you'll have in your home, what kind of an automobile you'll drive, what kind of engine the automobile will have, and on and on and on and on. Donald Trump says that's enough. We're going to get our hands around this and get it under control. This thing's on autopilot. Even worse, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's self-consuming, if you understand what I mean. It just keeps consuming and consuming, hence the Leviathan, as Thomas Hobbes called it in his famous book. Well, famous to some of us. Now, part of the problem goes back to a book I wrote, my first book, Men in Black. Men in Black was about the Supreme Court, but Men in Black could have very easily been about the federal judiciary, period. And so the federal judiciary views itself as an arm of this massive centralized government, and it does whatever it can to protect it. To protect it. This massive federal government has its prosecutors, it has its administrative lawyers, it has its civil lawyers, it has its appellate lawyers, it has its antitrust lawyers, thousands and thousands of federal lawyers on the payroll. To do what? To advance the federal government. To smother the rest of us. So Donald Trump says we're going to do some things here, and what happens? What happens? These so-called nonprofit organizations, these legal foundations, or Democrats using other litigators, they've been lying in wait. And this has been their plan. We spoke about this several months ago. That is to litigate everything and bring it in front of friendly judges. And they have a lot of friendly judges, a lot of them, in most of our cities. They went to Seattle to go to an old man, a federal judge. Oh, he's appointed by Reagan. Was never a Reaganite. It's a liberal criminal defense lawyer who I'm told is arrogant, stubborn. And that's what he demonstrated. So he puts in a temporary restraining order on birthright citizenship. Gives it no serious judicial attention, dismisses it as blatantly unconstitutional. Now we have another judge, Washington, D.C. And let's go through this, because these federal district judges, ladies and gentlemen, are going to be the counter to the election. See, they rely on the unelected parts of the government, as I've been writing about and talking about for 25 years, writing about longer than that, but in book form. When they lose elections, they go to the bureaucracy, they go to the courts, the unelected parts of the government, which they own. They pretty much own both. They pretty much own both. To stymie an election that they lose, or to support an election that they win. Federal district judge, writes NBC News today, granted an administrative stay in a case challenging the Trump administration's planned freeze of federal aid, pausing the plan for a week and setting a hearing for further arguments next Monday morning. The order only applies to the pause of disbursements and open grants, Judge Lauren Akon said, and it doesn't get into the legality of the freeze, instead just giving the court more time for briefings. Now, what's new about this news story right up front, Mr. Producer? Don't they usually say the judge's affiliation? Who the judge is appointed by? Right. Except when it comes to these radical left-wing judges. I believe this guy's a Biden judge. You want to quickly Google it, Mr. Producer? Just guessing. Because I've never heard of this judge before. And there is I don't even know if it's a male or a female. I think it's a male. The planned freeze, writes NBC, is part of a sweeping effort by President Donald Trump. So they have the media, the courts, the bureaucracy. The media, the courts, the bureaucracy. That's what Trump is up against. That's what we're up against. And by the way, interesting to hear some of our liberal friends on Fox and elsewhere to talk about separation of powers. Wow, I never heard them talk about separation of powers. I hear them about destroying the independence of the Supreme Court. I hear them defending Joe Biden when he defies a Supreme Court ruling that says he cannot eliminate student debt, but he did to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. He can't do that, they say. That is Trump. But Trump hasn't violated any order. And there is no Supreme Court order. What is it? Biden, right? That's what I thought. Biden. It's a Biden judge. That judge is there to protect what Biden did, the Biden regime, and all past Democrats. The planned freeze is part of a sweeping effort by Donald Trump and his advisors to eliminate government spending that's not in line with his agenda. He's asked for a freeze so he can find out what the hell's going on. It's funny. It's okay for the judge to put a freeze on the freeze while he's trying to figure out what's going on. But when the elected president of the United States, the head of the executive branch, says, I need a freeze to figure out what's going on, well, we got to hold off on that. So keep spending until I, the judge, put a freeze on the freeze in order to see if I agree with the freeze. The move was announced in a Monday night memo from the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, which said the agencies had to temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance and other relevant agency activities that may be implicated by the executive orders, including but not limited to financial assistance for foreign aid, non-governmental organizations. See that? Excuse me. Foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, which are all these radical left-wing groups. DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal. So there he is, Trump, striking right at the heart of you and me and the American taxpayer, financing the radical left, non-governmental organizations DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal, and the judge says, wait, you can't freeze that. I'm putting a freeze on your freeze so I can see if I agree with you. And so, of course, Trump is striking at the monster, at the Leviathan. He's striking at it. And so they're going to the courts, the unelected judge, a Biden appointee, who gives them at least temporarily what they want. Just like they go out to the West Coast, to Seattle, to an old man on senior status, a federal judge who shouldn't even be a federal judge anymore. But don't worry, he's a regular appointee, who gave them what they wanted on birthright citizenship. So this is the way it is. When a conservative, a Donald Trump, win an election, the real insurrection, the real usurpation, the real anti-democratic forces, and I mean that, unelected judges, unelected bureaucrats, unelected non-governmental organizations and radical leftists, many of which and whom have been funded by you and me, they jump into action. They've got their plans ready to go if they lose an election. They're the real insurrectionists. They're enshrined in our system. They're enshrined in our system. And so on goes NBC News. And we have a media that is not only not curious, a media that is filled with propagandists for the left. This is part of the culture that Donald Trump is dealing with. This is why they tried to put him in prison. I'm just telling you. The freeze immediately sparked confusion about exactly what types of federal spending would be affected. And Tuesday's court order was just the first step in what's expected to be a major legal battle over the issue that could quickly end up before the Supreme Court. And they've worked over the court. They've worked over a couple of justices. And if the justices don't give them what they want, we're going to get right back to stuffing the Supreme Court with a few more Stalinists, all that kind of stuff. Because the poor leftists, they just never get what they want. And so they try to steamroll the entire system. Steamroll. The power of Congress to dictate federal spending as outlined in the Constitution will be at the center of litigation that could end up at the Supreme Court. So they've already decided, NBC News, that Trump's actions are unconstitutional. I don't know what these courts are going to do. They're unpredictable. You got kooks, leftists, ideologues, cowards all over the damn place wearing black robes, many of whom are positioning themselves. Some of them want bigger positions in the court system. Some of them want the write-up by the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost. These are all flesh and blood, these people. There's a relative small percentage of federal judges or any judges that actually just call it as they see it, based on the text, the original meaning, the legislative history, that is, the law and the Constitution. There's damn few of them. And when they do, wait a minute, that's got to be a right-winger. Wait a minute, that's Supreme Court. We got to change the court. Wait a minute. Yeah. While they're busy yelling about Trump doesn't have this power, Joe Biden used the bureaucracy, used his so-called power to change our entire economy, to change our energy system, to change our border and immigration system, to change our educational system, to change science. Men are men and women are women. No, they're not. He didn't do any of this by legislation. Not one damn whit of it. And yet, now the Democrats are saying, wait a minute, only Congress can dictate federal spending. And they've got their judges and they've got their bureaucrats. And they've got some cowardly Republicans on the Supreme Court, namely the Chief Justice and Barrett, his lapdog. We'll see how this goes.